The Patriots are going back to the Super Bowl for the 87th time. Disneyland's Tower of Terror is no more.
Boo.
And our visit to one of the nation's most haunted mental hospitals. All that and more on this week's Dude for Adults. Let's go! Welcome everyone to our debut episode. We appreciate and thank you for joining us. You know guys, my dad told me one time that it's okay not to be funny, but it's not okay not to have a sense of humor. Well, we have finally arrived in the podcast realm after being asked to host this show to give the people out there a much needed break from the overly serious, negative tone the world has set lately, and just to laugh and have some fun.
And we should learn a few things as well.
From each other, correct. And even our listener out there. So, welcome in everyone to Dude.
We're adults.
There we go. My name is Brian, and I'm joined by my other hosts, my best friends of almost 20 years, in no particular order, Jason and Mike. How are you doing, guys?
Good, and I think that was in particular order, personally.
Even though there's only two of you guys.
Hello, listeners. My name is Michael Cabral, or Mike, or Mikey, as Brian will probably call me throughout this podcast.
Correct, as you will hear more than once from me.
We live all across the country. I represent the Northeast, specifically New England, because I live 30 minutes outside of Boston. We're all at different stages of our lives. Me personally, I'm recently married, and
very recently married.
Yeah, October, and it's January. And my wife and I wasted no time with kids because she's pregnant. We're going to be having our first kid later this year.
Now, Mike, was that planned, or was it well, let's just see what happens. Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about all things your sexual life.
Yes, because Lauren would appreciate that, as would I, and my parents and my family. It was let's see what happens. I mean, that sounds like a game show, but not to downplay the fact of having a child. But we were not planning, but we were also not trying not to have kids. So it just happened really quickly. Not that does not mean to sound negative, but I'm excited and super happy, but also extremely terrified. All at the same time. And I hope to share the listeners, what it's like to be recently married, what it's like to become a dad and a new dad, and as well as being a fan of one of the most villainized sports teams in our country, wrongfully so.
Yeah, I feel so bad for you guys.
You should.
Yeah.
And, it's really tough having to go to the Super Bowl frequently and having the best coach in the history of the NFL and having the best quarterback in the history of the NFL. But at the same time, you're constantly villainized as cheaters or arrogant, if you will. And also, I hope to shed some light on what it's like to be a guy with a diet of a 7-year-old who's also married to a personal trainer. Because I have to sneak Sour Patch Kids in my kangaroo sweatshirt pockets constantly. And also...
Whoa. What's a kangaroo sweatshirt pocket?
And I thought you were going to say Dunkaroos. That's what I originally thought of when you said kangaroo.
Well, kangaroo is my own term. I guess it's probably not kangaroo because that's just one pouch going down. That would be a kangaroo. But I'm just talking about whatever you want to call the pocket in sweatshirts where you can meet your hands in the middle, in the front. Mine's usually filled with sugar and sour remnants because I put Sour Patch Kids in there when I go sit down on my couch and watch TV to hide it from my wife.
And the other adult in the room is Jason. So,
hey, everybody.
Jason, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, if Michael is on the East Coast rooting for the terrible New England Patriots, I'm the host on the West Coast in Northern California, who is a diehard, out of place Los Angeles Dodgers fan, and even more out of place Pittsburgh Steelers fan.
Way out of place, yes.
Yeah, so it is my pleasure to be here with Mike and Brian, and I bring to the podcast the perspective of somebody who has been married for 10 years this year and has 2 amazing kids, a 4-year-old daughter, 5-year-old and almost 3-year-old son, Jack, who is currently sleeping next door.
You mean next door, like in the house next door?
Oh my God, wouldn't
Send
that be
him to the
nice?
neighbors.
I had my own house. No, in the next room over.
Jason, how is it being a Dodgers fan in the Lions Den?
You get a lot of the same crap that you would expect, which is to say that everybody thinks that Dodgers fans are all gangbangers, to which I say, how are the Oakland Raiders doing? You
mean the Las Vegas Raiders?
Oh, yeah, that's right, the Las Vegas Raiders. No, I get the sense that I've only been up here in the Bay Area for about 6 months, 7 months. You know, there's a lot of really good sports teams up here. I mean, the Giants have been pretty good recently. The Warriors are really good. The Sharks are really good.
So are you on that bandwagon too with the Warriors, along with everybody else?
No, I don't really follow basketball very much, but I can definitely get the sense that there are a lot of bandwagon fans up here. And I'm not saying that like I'm not a bandwagon fan and I'm mad that you are, but it's more like, really? You're only a fan of this sport in general because the Sharks or the Warriors or the Giants are so good. Like, let's talk about their history. Oh, no, you don't want to talk about their history because you don't know anything about their history because you just started watching last month? Okay, let's throttle down the hate talk about the Dodgers or the Steelers because you're not really a fan of the sport.
No one. I've never met a Warriors fan in my life until, the past few years when they became really good.
It was the same thing with the Clippers a couple of years ago when the Clippers suddenly got good, and it was like, oh, yeah, we've loved the Clippers.
Well,
and it's like, give me a break.
Hang on. Frankie Muniz of Malcolm in the Middle was a diehard Clippers fan back in the 90s, and I know that for a fact. So why don't you back that train
So that
up
proves all legitimacy because Malcolm in the Middle was at their games more than twice a year.
Yeah, Frankie Muniz is really the everyman of Los Angeles.
You know what, Brian? Or
Frankie
Brian Jason,
Muniz.
if Bryan Cranston were a Clippers fan, you'd be like, oh, my, they must be really awesome because he was in Breaking Bad, so he's amazing, and so are the Clippers.
Yeah.
Speaking of Breaking Bad, last night Sarah's watching it for the first time, and we watched the episode where one of the 2 cousins that's still alive, he saw Walt outside of his hospital window, and he crawled out of his bed without legs.
Wait, spoiler alerts for the people who haven't seen it that are 5 years behind, but still, go ahead.
No, at this point, if you haven't watched Breaking Bad, you don't get to call spoilers.
Okay, so let's talk about this really quick. How long should you give somebody before, like, with spoiler alerts?
With a show as big as Breaking Bad, I think you get like a year and a half. That's it.
A year and a half. So like the new Star Wars movie. Not the newest one, but the old one, The Force Awakens. It would be okay to go out there and tell people what happened in that one and not be upset if they were like, I haven't seen the movie yet. And it's like, well, if you haven't seen the movie yet and it's been out for over a year,
then
you're SOL.
You deserve to know that Luke Skywalker appears in the last frame of the movie.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I agree with that.
I'm just messing you with the spoilers, by the way. I'm just being facetious.
Yeah.
Because, Bill Hader, I don't know if this is true or not, he was fired from his job because he told people how Titanic ended when he worked at a movie theater. I don't know if it's true or not. I just read it online, which, is the true source of news, anything on Facebook.
Facebook is a source of news nowadays. And speaking of the news, let's go ahead and get to the first segment of the show that we like to call News of the Week, where each of us picks a news item that doesn't necessarily have to do with world news and the down and dreary world of politics and everything that goes on with that, but just other stuff when it comes to it could be entertainment, feel-good stories, an interesting study or article we read. And so the first thing I want to talk with you guys...
Wait, Brian, before we jump into that, which we will, can we just learn a bit about you for the listeners?
Oh, yeah, it's myself.
We won't derail. Let's just talk about you.
Yeah, let's talk about me. So I am from the desert, and I've lived in the desert most of my life, and so I reside now in Tucson, Arizona. And I originally was going to do this podcast outside, but it actually was getting a little bit hot out there. I started to sweat, and that shows you what it's like here in January. I think we are up to the 70s right now, so which people go, oh, that has to be so nice. No, it's not. Like, I don't like that because that means it's going to be 147 this summer.
Move to New England.
Yeah, no, I can't stand 13 degrees then either. So, anywho, so that is a little about me and where I live. I am the father of a 1.5-year-old. Well, she's almost 2, actually, with another one on the way here in about 10. What are we at? 9, 10 weeks. Yeah,
Whoa.
my son is on the way. Yeah, yeah, right around the corner. So I'll be joining Jason in the world of 2 kiddos here shortly. So yeah. Good luck, right? Good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck.
So that's a little bit about me, and I'm sure you'll hear a little bit of the stories I have about my daughter and soon-to-be son. Welcome in here in the world, and just all the craziness that goes on with that, and being married for almost 5 years. Yeah, almost 5 years. So that's weird to think about that it's been almost 5 years. Going off of that topic, now that you guys know a little bit about me, like I said before, we'll go into our first segment called News of the Week, where we'll just talk about some topics that have interested all 3 of us this past week and just get the other person's perspective on that. With that being said, I will go ahead and start off this week with the first thing that I found interesting, and the reason I found this interesting is because the listener doesn't know this, but I will go ahead and tell them right now that Jason and Mike in their past lives worked for Disneyland, for and at Disneyland. So they have a big connection with all things Disney and love the brand and love the place. So one of the things that I found interesting, fellas, was the happiest place on earth a few weeks ago officially shut down the Tower of Terror to transform the ride. It is a travesty, but they're going to transform the ride. It's not going away, but they're going to transform the ride into their newest attraction, Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. And that ride will open this summer to coincide with the sequel's theatrical release. Early reactions to this, whether it be from the critics or the public, has been negative. So what are your two's perspective of this, especially because you guys used to work for the Mouse?
I understand why they're doing it for the financial reasons, because it's relevant and people are going to be super excited, and that movie was widely successful. But for the nostalgic Disney lover / scary, cool, creepy story lover in me, I am very sad, because that was, if not my favorite ride, one of my most favorite rides at the parks, specifically Disney World, because I'm a huge Disney World fan. But it was just a really great experience from the beginning to the end. And it does actually bridge generations, because people are like, what is Twilight Zone? But I can actually see how that could not be as popular as Guardians of the Galaxy with today's young crowds.
Jason, what do you think?
I think it's a disaster, and here's why. In 2012, Disney California Adventure reopened with a cohesive theme for the first time in its short 10-year history, and a mere 4 years after reopening with a cohesive California retro, waltz California theme, they go and they tear the heart out of the Hollywoodland part of the park, only to capitalize on what was a crappy movie, Guardians of the Galaxy, and eliminating any sort of cohesion in the theme of the backlot area. I think Pandora at Disney World is going to prove that just because a movie is hot in 1 year doesn't mean that it's going to be the next Star Wars or the next Jurassic Park. It is a cash grab of the highest order. And
Wait. Disney's having a cash grab?
Disney Channel, Disney Consumer Products, Disney Pictures. Yes, of course, they're all cash grab. But there is something about preserving story and magic and guest experience and cohesiveness of story that Disney Parks and Disneyland has historically been pretty proud of.
And I could not agree with you. And I could not agree with you more. And I mean, point being, like, when they got rid of Sounds Dangerous by Drew Carey, that was a travesty. I mean, if you want to talk about preserving something that was...
You want to talk about money grab.
that was at Disney World. But if you want to talk preserving about something great, that was...
Do you guys think that Disney is being too fixated with new superhero movies? Because haven't they done a lot with Star Wars now that they own Star Wars, and they're putting that into Disneyland and Disney World? Do you think that Disneyland is losing some of its charm of the movies of their past?
I would say so, and I think Jason's nodding his head in agreement. But I would also say Star Wars, an example, is I would say that's a good idea, personally, much better than Avatar Land. I think Avatar Land is a huge mistake, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it'll look beautiful and it'll be a beautiful experience, but Star Wars will be so much more popular. Avatar Land, I mean, that was one movie 6 years ago that I don't know. I just don't think that's a good idea.
The whole notion of Disneyland was to create these like non-branded themed environments
Correct.
where you
Yeah.
can go and create your own stories as a young girl or a young boy or a young at heart individual.
Or
it's
Jason,
not a, it's
as a 35-year-old, 34-year-old.
okay. All right, we'll get into this later on. This is not necessary, but it's not about dropping you into this pre-baked experience with a linear storyline that already has a beginning, a middle, a bad guy, and an end, and a happy ever after. I mean, it's Disneyland is about your place with your storyline to create. It's not about having you like just passively observe a story being told in front of you, which is what Mission Breakout and what Star Wars Land are becoming.
And I understand why they're doing it, but
to
I don't know.
play devil's advocate just for a second on that. Yeah, I do think there's definitely a lack of originality, not just with Disney, but with most things in general. Sequels, prequels, spin-offs, whatever. But having that does create some I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but just some familiarity, some nostalgia, if you will. And for case in point, right? You want to go with something that you have some relation to. Like when you went on Rock and Roller Coaster, Jason, didn't you have the nostalgia? Didn't you have the amazement? Didn't you have like, oh my God, this is Aerosmith? I mean, you could make the same argument for people going to see Star Wars and seeing it like come to life.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But I mean, how excited are you to end this podcast and go watch Guardians of the Galaxy in an hour or so?
I'm not excited to do that at all because I've seen it once or twice.
And what's the raccoon's name?
Rocket Raccoon, something like that. Rocket, I think.
And what's Chris Pratt's character's name?
Batista, the wrestler. That's all I know.
Yeah,
No.
exactly. Like,
Chris Pratt's Star-Lord, and
okay.
We can't ask Mike this question. Mike knows
Yeah,
the
all right,
most
exactly.
useless crap on the planet.
That's
so
true. I'm challenging Mike.
he's not a normal person in society. So
Right.
that normal
Are
person
any
in
of us
society
normal
would
people
not
in society?
realize that. So
I mean, I'm trying to make the same point that we're making with Pandora, which is to say, like, oh, what was the main character's name in Avatar? Well, I don't really remember. Well, therefore, the land's not good. Well, it may not be that the land's not good, but it means that, like, I'm not super compelled to go experience it, just like I'm not super compelled to go experience Mission Breakout Galaxy, or whatever it's called.
were you super compelled to go to Sounds Dangerous?
I went once and I was like, this is terrible.
Amazing.
This is
But that was original. Were you super compelled to go to the Indiana Jones ride?
yeah, but Indiana Jones has been around for.
But I'm making the point. Sounds Dangerous was completely original. Indiana Jones the ride.
Is Sound Dangerous? Is that the Drew Carey thing you're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, that'd have been
Yeah.
awesome to see.
Yeah, but nobody's arguing, Mike, that Sounds Dangerous was a good attraction. I mean, by the time that Indiana Jones, by the time Indiana Jones was a ride, it was already like one of those like cultural touchstones, which I do not believe, and I don't think you do either, that Guardians of the Galaxy has achieved.
No, I'm not saying it has at all. I'm just saying that he asked about Star Wars Land. So I'm saying I think Star Wars Land's, or whatever you want, a Star Wars attraction is different because it has that nostalgic sense of, it's so close to you, or some people out there, maybe not everyone, but it just has this magical feeling. And I agree with you with the sense of lack of originality. I do not disagree with that, but I think there could still be something amazing in the fact that Star Wars Land is going to be a huge, awesome thing for a lot of people because of how close it is to home and how much it means to them.
Okay, to end this conversation on a more positive note, if you could pick one song that you hope to hear in the new Mission Breakout ride, what would it be?
I would love to hear "In Your Eyes" by Peter Gabriel.
That's a good selection.
And I mean, that would be a weird song to hear going down a 13-story drop. But But if when the door opens, John Cusack's standing there with a boombox over his head, I would say that's a fantastic
Yes,
ride.
that would be a fantastic way to end that ride. I would say probably Aha's Take On Me, because that's just my favorite 80s song anyway, so anytime I can hear that song, I'll take it.
Well, you totally took my answer because that is also my favorite 80s song.
Ah, it's a great song.
Aha is both your guys' favorite 80s song.
When I think of like what sounds like an 80s song, like I think about Aha's Take On Me, and I remember the first time I saw the video on MTV.
Yes, that video is awesome.
How amazing that music video is. So I'm gonna say I'm gonna agree with Brian.
All right, fellas, now let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about sports really quick. And of course, obviously, the big topic this week is the Super Bowl, as the Atlanta Falcons are taking on the New England Patriots in Houston. But first off, before we talk about the big game, I just want to talk to you guys about this little news article that I found really quick. Apparently, NFL viewership was down 8% this year compared to 2015, and was down a whopping 14% the first 9 weeks of the season. Now, the article goes on to blame the election. It also talks about, was there a Peyton Manning effect? You know, that he's no longer in the league. Did that turn people off? What about, it talked about Kaepernick pissing off the country. Did that have an effect on people tuning out? And just another thing of, were the games exciting this year? And so I'll just tell you my take on this side. I am a diehard Denver Broncos fan, have been for a long time, but I've liked them even before Peyton Manning. I cheered for him and was obsessed with him before he got there, and I was obsessed with them this year as well. However, I did find myself this year, just with football in general, not just the Denver Broncos, but football in general, just less interested. I don't know. I don't know if it was the games.
Because you have a new kid though too, and you're busy?
No, I mean I had her last year. You know,
you could be more busy than
when the stuff was going on. But I don't think it was. I mean, I was home on Sundays.
So I have two thoughts on this. Well, actually, one thought and one, kind of point. My thought is, and I don't know, I haven't verified this, so say what you will. Has Red Zone had any impact on this? I don't know. Do they take Red Zone into account of NFL viewership? Because I find more and more people are watching Red Zone. Why would you watch one game of a team you're not interested in or moderately interested in because they're not your team, as opposed to watching Red Zone? Furthermore, having lived in California, Florida, and Massachusetts, I find myself watching CBS a lot more because the Patriots are always on, as opposed to when I live in Florida or California, where I would go to a restaurant or a bar, which I find more people are doing, which may be impacting it. I don't know, but that's just my speculation. I also want to point out that of all the teams that have gone down in viewership,
oh gosh,
New England has not. And I'm not saying that as bias. It's true.
What about you, Jason? I mean, did you pay attention to the NFL as closely this year as you usually do?
I mean, every year I hope to watch as many games as possible, and this year I got Red Zone, as you guys know, and I used it one afternoon only, the very first afternoon I had it. And that was just simply a function of having two crazy kids and wanting to be like taking care of stuff around the house on the 2 days off a week.
But Jason, how glorious was that afternoon?
Oh, it was amazing, and it wasn't because I didn't want to watch it, and it wasn't because like I have lost interest. But I think if I think outside of my own household, like I think that like as consumers, like we want like big personalities, and we want like compelling storylines, and outside of like Kaepernick, which wasn't a feel-good storyline,
No.
It didn't really feel like, to the casual observer here, like there were a lot of like records about to be broken, or incredible teams, or an unbeaten record.
Wait. There's an incredible team this year.
No. But yeah, to you, yes, no, I know.
To you, though, Mike. To you,
right? But it wasn't like I don't know. The Arizona Cardinals were doing something that was unheard of this year, or they had some kind of dynamic new player that was on every highlight reel. And so I feel like there just wasn't the compelling, like, headline grabbing news from the NFL this year that kept people tuning in week to week to see how a fill in the blank team was going to continue to dominate or whatever. Which is the same reason I think that like baseball is suffering, because they don't have those big personalities, those like the home run chase isn't happening because of obviously steroids, but like it's not it really services the really intentional fan rather than like the passive fan who just wants to sort of pick up a game and just enjoy an afternoon watching.
So are the games too long? So this article also talked about that these games are getting really long. Maybe there's too many commercials in it. And Roger Goodell has actually entertained the thought of shortening these games. And the reason for it, gentlemen, is because the millennials don't have a long attention span. So now that they are going to be one of the biggest populations in this country, we need to cater to them more than we currently are, and make these games even shorter, and to make them more exciting for that generation, because apparently Americans just cannot stay seated or focused for 2 or 3 hours at a time.
Well, I think they are too long, and if Goodell is saying that because he's done research among millennials that's credible, that suggests that they're not keeping the attention
Goodell
span.
Is credible. Nothing he.
I mean,
coming from a Patriots fan,
coming from most NFL fans, to be honest.
I mean, yes, they're too long. I mean, I record games that I can't watch if they're Steeler games, and like I even fast forward through like moments when I assume there's not going to be action because they are so long. So no,
do you guys know the total?
Hang on. Is it the length or is it the content? Because Jason, couldn't you sit there and watch 3 hours of
Red Zone?
No, Stranger Things. You could watch 3 hours of Stranger Things, and that's just as long as 3 hours of a football game, right?
But that doesn't have commercials in it either.
No. But listen to me. It's the content. It's not the length. That sounds weird. That sounds like a guy trying to argue something. I know, but I'm serious though.
You're right.
Millennials don't have patience. You could say one way or the other in that argument, but I could tell you, millennials will sit there and binge watch 5 episodes of something on Netflix because they don't have patience because they're interested in the content. Now, the content of football, I could argue, is not as compelling to millennials because of, as you said, all the commercials, but then Red Zone doesn't have any commercials, and I think a lot of people are watching Red Zone because it's perfect for that content. It's like, oh, this is exciting, but then you lose the loyalty to one team, especially with fantasy, especially with all these other things going on around there. You pick players instead of teams. I think the football viewership is going down because you get a loss of loyalty, you get a lot more commercials, and you have things like Red Zone. I don't think that has anything to do with patience.
No, I think Mike has a really good point. I think that it could be that the networks need to evolve how they cover games, and maybe instead of being just broadcasting a single game in a linear sense, that they're. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. That they give themselves the flexibility to go between games, and when one is a blowout or it's halftime or there's something going on, that they're able to keep their audience engaged with compelling content. Because you're right, the reason Red Zone is successful is because it's constantly the most exciting parts of the game.
You're so right.
The big network.
Well, it's constantly when
haven't figured out how to do that.
It's constantly when the ball is in play, and going with that. Do you guys know the total amount of time in a football game, meaning we'll sit there and watch it for about 2.5, 3 hours? Do you know the total time that the ball is actually in play of those?
Probably
3 hours?
Slightly more than a baseball game.
Is it 15 minutes?
Mike, what do you think?
Is it like Price is Right, where if I guess under, I'm right? I guess 1 minute then.
1 minute of ball time in a whole game?
I'm saying if it's like Price is Right, it's the game we're playing. Yeah, I would say 1 minute, 1 second. What's the actual retail price?
The actual retail time that the ball is actually in play is 11 minutes.
Oh, I win then because Jason said 15 and I got 1, so I win.
So let's go ahead and end this sports segment with just a real quick hit. Mike, anything of note out there in New England right now since you're in Boston with the Patriots going to the Super Bowl?
It's really nothing going on crazy. You just hear stuff on the radio and then stuff on...
just another Super Bowl, right, Mike?
No, I'm serious, though. Like, it's not Super Bowl week yet. I was in Hawaii for the past 2 weeks, so I haven't really been exposed to as much as I usually am. And I live on a quiet street in a small town, so I haven't really seen much as far as fanfare. If I were in the city every day or down by Foxborough walking around, maybe, I don't know. I can tell you that when the Super Bowl comes closer, maybe there'll be a lot more. I'm going to a friend's house. I haven't told my wife yet. She might have just overheard me. And it's a family friend, and we're going to have a bunch of people over. But it would be the same in any other city. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and get to our feature segment this week. This week, I want to discuss our visit that we had a long time ago, I think almost 10 years ago now, to one of the nation's most haunted mental hospitals. The reason why this came back to my mind as a story that we should tell is I was listening to a podcast by Chris Jericho, who is a WWE wrestler, and he had two guys on there named Dave Schrader and Tim Dennis, and they're from a popular paranormal show called Darkness Radio that goes around the whole nation. I mean, they've had it for 10 years, and it's a pretty popular show. Now, during this conversation, I guess they were talking about demons and how, like, do demons and ghosts grab people, and people reporting them being grabbed or something happening to them and leaving marks on their body by whether it was a demon or a ghost. And Jericho asked Dave if he had ever been scratched or grabbed before when he was on an excursion. And here's what Dave said and why it got me really interested in this topic and why I think we should discuss what happened to us. He said, "I was at a really weird place and I can never remember the damn name of the place, which is probably good because I don't know if I would be arrested for going in there. We were there really not legally. It's a college in California that has a old mental hospital on site. We went in to investigate, and I was with Bill Murphy from Fact or Fake. It's a TV show, I guess, on Sci-Fi, and a couple other people to investigate. And we were walking around in this building, and I come out, and Bill says to him, 'What happened?' And I go, 'What do you mean?' And he goes, 'Dude, you're bleeding.' And I'm like, 'Where am I bleeding?' And sure enough, I had this blood pouring down the side of my face. He goes, I guess Bill told him, 'Hey, let's document it.' He said we can't document it because he didn't know if maybe, like, as they were walking through this place, if he got scratched by something and didn't feel it, or you know, got hung up on something. He said, but you could see the skin was lifted and something had caught him. He just dismissed it. He went into the bathroom. He turned around to wash his hands, and there was no scratch and there was no blood. He walks back out and goes, 'Okay, we should have documented it.' And they asked why, and he says, 'Where is it? Where's the blood and where is the scratch?' And it was nowhere to be found on him. And he goes on to say that there was a scratch there because it was one of those scratches to where you pat it with a napkin and it continues to flow. And that's one of the main reasons why he went into the bathroom, was to wash his hands and try and actually stop this from flowing out. And he says it was a continual cut that was gone. So first off, before we talk a little bit about that and our experiences, some people out there may be wondering, okay, where is this place? What is it called? And Mike, do you have any information or backstory on the place that he's talking about here?
Yeah, it's the now it's a college. I'm assuming he's talking about what is now California State University, Channel Islands, which I think, Jason, maybe someone in your family went to, right?
Yeah, my sister did. Yeah.
But it was the Camarillo State Mental Hospital. And Jason actually lived in Camarillo, so that entire area used to be a state mental hospital. I'm just kidding.
That's why Jason lived there.
I'm just messing. But the actual mental hospital was, I think it started in like the 30s or 20s, somewhere around there. And it was a giant property, and it was really it hit its height in the 50s and 60s, I think. And they did a lot of psych evals, but also probably some stuff that wouldn't be considered as sane, or not sane, would be acceptable today.
Ethical.
And it was, what's that?
Ethical?
Ethical, that's the word I was looking for. And it was shut down in the mid to late 90s and was abandoned for a while, and they decided to make it a college campus, because if you're going to have a mental institution, why not create something as crazy as a mental institution to make it a college campus? Because that's the craziest thing you can actually make next to a mental institution. So it's just a natural transition.
And Mike, is there any info, like, do you know anything why it's considered haunted? Like, why is it one of the most haunted places?
Well, first of all, any mental institution that's abandoned is going to be considered extremely haunted because of all the tragedy that occurred there and all the, all the death if there was death, or the mental breakdown, anything like that usually is associated with something being haunted, whether or not it is haunted. But that place is in particular considered haunted because it's been abandoned for a while, and they did a lot of, like you said, questionable things, or like I said, questionable things. And it also, I heard it was based on the song Hotel California by the Eagles. But
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Widely debated and speculated. I don't only think the Eagles would, or their close friends would actually know the answer to that, and I would say it's probably not. But that being said, any mental institution is considered haunted. This one is just extremely haunted, I guess, in the sense where it had a lot of stuff going on. Any mental institution had a lot of bad stuff going on, but that's all I know about it. I don't know specifically what happened there.
Okay, so going along with that, we're going to talk about kind of what specifically happened to us then. We just heard what happened to Dave when he was there, and we've actually been there, the three of us have actually been there twice. The first time we went there, we were in college.
Not as patients.
Not as patients, no. And the first time we went there, you heard Dave talk about how he was trespassing. The first time we went there, we weren't necessarily trespassing because I don't believe there was anything around it. It was just on the backside of the college. I think the college was still being built or had just opened up, either one, and there was really nothing blocking the backside of this thing. And so we decided to. I remember.
Well, there was a giant no trespassing sign.
Oh, was there? I don't.
Yes.
I don't remember that, but or I choose not to remember that. But we decided to go there after Mike telling us stories about it. Jason, did you know, living in Camarillo, that this place was even there?
Yeah, because my mom had gone as a sign language interpreter and worked with some of the patients a few times and taken dogs there for like therapy dogs with the patients who needed
Psychiatric care.
Yeah, exactly. So I definitely knew. I mean, you couldn't live in Camarillo and not know that this place existed. But I'm having a really hard time remembering the first time that we went.
Oh, well, let us refresh your memory then, Jason, because your actions are the thing that I think most of what Mike and I remember. So, and Mike, feel free to jump in here anytime. So the first time, maybe the reason you don't remember it as much, Jason, is because the first time actually isn't as eventful, obviously, as the second time that we'll get to here. But the first time, I don't know if we necessarily got in the building. I don't think we did. I think we saw it from the outside. We saw some cracked windows. I think we got up close to the windows to see what was necessary inside. But the one thing that I remember is we went around to the back side of this place, and we walked up where there were some windows, but then at the bottom you could see there were some bars that were probably about a foot high off the ground that you could see down into the cellar. And I choose to believe that there was green light coming from the cellar.
I remember this. This. Yep.
And Mike, the way we processed to this, where the cellar was Mike was first, because Mike is fearless when it comes to these things. I was behind Mike because whereas the stuff doesn't necessarily scare me, at the same time it still just freaks me out, and I'd rather have someone else lead it than me. And then Jason, you were following me. Mike, what did you see when we looked down into the cellar?
I saw a foot. Whether or not it was a foot of a person or a boot or a shoe that was just there, that was not attached to a person or something supernatural. I don't remember. I just saw that, and it kind of spooked me because I think my initial reaction was not just, oh, it's a ghost, but it's like, oh shit, we shouldn't be here.
Correct. And so I remember you saying that specifically, Mike, was like, oh my gosh. And you kind of took one step back. And I think you said to me, like, did you see that? And I was like, and I cannot remember if I necessarily saw it or not, but I think I was just kind of freaked out by your reaction. And I started to take multiple steps back. Well, as I'm taking multiple steps back, I turn and say, Jason, I said, Jason, did you see that? And as I turned to look, Jason, you had to have been 50 feet, 60 feet from me. Dust was turning up in the grass because you were running as fast as you could for the exit of that place. And that was the end of that first trip because there was no way Jason was going back in there. So that was the first thing that happened. So was it paranormal? We don't necessarily know, but looking down in that cellar was definitely creepy. Now the second time, I was getting ready to leave California. I'd actually just gotten a job as a news reporter, so I was getting ready to leave. And one of my last hurrahs that I wanted was for the three of us to actually go back to that mental hospital one more time to see if we could get around and what would happen there the second time. So after much convincing of Jason, we made the trek back out there. And this time, do you guys remember as we pulled into this place? Do you remember the huge wall that was around this place now? And that wall had to have been, I want to say, 8 feet.
Oh, at least, yeah. It was huge. It was a huge fence we had to get over to get into that same courtyard we had just walked into previously.
Correct. And so there was this huge wall barring us from getting in, and plenty of no trespassing signs that I definitely saw this time.
Trespass, please.
And so after getting over that wall, we were walking around and trying to find a door to get in this place. And I think secretly, Jason, were you hoping we found a door that was open?
Oh, I was hoping we would never find a door and we would get bored, or security would come and kick us out.
Actually, the thing I was most afraid of was security, because I didn't want to get in trouble.
Yes, exactly.
I would have much rather run into a ghost than someone of law enforcement, to be honest.
There was security. There was security driving around that place, because I do remember us staying in the car as we watched the security guard drive around, and once he was far enough away, that's when we got out. So we end up finding an open door, and it was the double doors that there were a set of double doors that led into another set of double doors that you had to open up. And so we found our way inside there, and we propped those doors open. And guys, I believe it would have been in late September. What was the weather like that night?
I remember it like it was yesterday. There was no wind, a couple clouds, but otherwise a completely calm, clear night.
Correct. And that's how I remember it too. Like completely calm, completely no wind, no anything, nothing out of the ordinary.
I remember blistering rain and extremely gusty wind. I don't remember the weather actually.
So
that's an important part, because that plays into a later part of the story, that the weather was so calm that night.
Correct. And so we were able to prop these doors open. And it's not like we propped these doors open with rocks or anything like that, but they opened up, and it wasn't like they would swing back. It's not like they spring to them. They stayed open, and so we had both doors open. And we walked in, and Mike, do you want to take it from here? Do you remember walking into that place and what it felt like? Because I specifically remember the temperature when it came to this place and the temperature changes that happened.
I mean, I'm blending both visits in my head, so pardon me for that. But I do remember it becoming really cold inside, which is counterintuitive to going into somewhere as opposed to staying outside, because there was no AC running in that place because it was abandoned and shut down. I also distinctly remember walking into a room where there was a bathtub in the middle of the room. And why would there be a bathtub in the middle of a room, other than the fact that maybe they did electroshock therapy, or they were just moving bathtubs around? I don't know.
So I remember the part where we realized, okay, I mean, the main event of this whole trip to me was, as Mike mentioned, it was very cold inside that building. It was very, very cold. Mike was in front, it was me, and then it was Jason behind me. And I believe our other friend Aaron was there also. And it was very cold inside this building. Well, we had walked through an archway into another room. And that room, Mike made the comment right away, and I noticed it right away, that room must have been 95, 100 degrees. The temperature changed dramatically going through this archway, which was weird because it wasn't like there was a closed door there preventing the heat from getting to the rest of the building. And Mike, you said to me,
"Yep,
we should not be here." You just had a feeling. You turned around and said, "I just have a feeling that we should not be here."
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing.
And why did you feel that way?
I just felt, I don't know, I can't describe it. I just felt uncomfortable. And then I saw like a weird mist, and chalk that up to what you will, dust. My eyes playing tricks on me. And right when I said that, everyone's like, all right, let's get the hell out of here.
And so, Jason, right when he said that, I remember it clear as day. Right as Mike said, I don't think we should be here. We should not be here. What happened?
Jason.
I will never forget this as long as I live. I was behind you guys, and I was still standing in the larger common room that had the bathtub in the middle of it. And gosh. There was no wind, there was no weather. And as soon as Mike said that, I had turned and kind of surveyed the room, and the double doors slammed shut. The entrance that we came in through slammed shut. I screamed with such abandonment that I had no control over my body. It wasn't like you scream when you're in the middle of an exciting moment. Like, it was just, what does your body do when it absolutely goes into paranoid shock and complete paralyzing fear? That was apparently the noise that I make, because I ran for those doors with everything that I could muster. I ran through those doors, ran into the courtyard outside. I have no idea if you guys, I don't think you guys followed me.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
I didn't.
Yes, you did.
I
stayed
did.
for a second.
So
I remember I was alone for a good 2 minutes.
And Brian, did you go back inside?
Yeah, so hold on. We'll talk about that part in a minute. So I remember, Jason, the way you described it is a perfect way of saying it, because I remember I took off running as well, going through those doors, because I remember it clear as day. When those doors shut, it wasn't like the wind just caught it and shut them. This was like a slam.
It slammed.
Like, get
Slammed
out of
shut.
my home. Like, get out of my place.
Like-
And so...
Yeah, never mind.
And so it shut, and I remember you took off running, and I took off running as well. And the way you described it is, it's something like that amount of fear or the adrenaline or whatever it is takes over your body and just tells you to get out of there as fast as you can. And so I remember running out into that courtyard, and just all of us freaked out. I mean, literally all of us being so freaked out as to what happened. And Mike, of course, says, "Let's go back in." And Jason was... there was nothing, I don't even think, outside of a dollar amount could have gotten Jason back in that building. But I decided to follow Mike into another part of that building, and we ended up going in. And we walked down this hallway. And of course, it's got to be one of those hallways where the light flickers above, the lights going in and out.
Even though The Walking Dead wasn't a show yet, I felt like that scene in The Walking Dead where, like, Rick's walking down in the hospital, like, the empty room.
Yeah. And there was a trash can in the middle of trash can in the hallway, and not a ton of trash around, but just a trash can in the middle of the hallway. And we started walking down this hallway, and it's one of those things like, why are we doing this? Why am I here? And Mike, what'd you see?
I mean, people are going to be like, oh, you're lying. I just saw a figure. I don't know if it was, again, my eyes playing tricks on me, or it just felt like heavy. I don't know if you ever felt that heavy moment in life where you're just like, I can't describe it. And it like was just this dark misty thing. And I was like, not frozen in fear, but just frozen in like disbelief. And I thought I was alone, actually. I didn't realize you were there, to be honest.
Well, I was there with you. The reason why you probably felt alone is because right after you said, "Whoa, Brian, did you see that?" I took off running like a bat out of hell, and I was not going to stay in there any longer, and took a hurdle over that trash can to get out. And I will always remember this. I came out, and there was a little rampway going up with a rail to get into that part of the building. I came running out of there, and I hopped over the rail. Well, when Jason saw me running as fast as I could, Jason decided it was time for him to run too, and Jason ran toward the wall and climbed that wall to get out of that place as fast as he could, and that ended our time there. So, gentlemen, I just want to ask this quick question. I am not necessarily the biggest believer in the paranormal or the biggest believer when it comes to ghosts and goblins and demons and the paranormal activity in general. I've never been necessarily a believer in that kind of stuff. And I still to this day don't necessarily believe a lot in that. However, in that experience, in that moment, I believed.
Well, I think it's, for me personally, I don't know if there's ghosts like intellectual hauntings going on, because if that were true, ghosts would be in like women's locker rooms that are, sitting courtside at a ball game or a basketball game or something ridiculous. I think it's just like people definitely leave an imprint of themselves. Like, it's like when you go into someone's room that's still alive and you can feel their presence there. They're not dead. They're just, their presence is there. And I think I'd take it a step further, and it's almost like a tape playing, where it's like if someone does something so much or something so much, they just leave an imprint. Call it what you will. I mean, I'm very much speculative of actual ghosts like going around and like haunting people, because as intelligent beings, because why would they be in like dark, dank basements and in the worst places where you would never want to be, as opposed to like walking around the streets and like doing cool stuff. I don't.
And Jason, I've never asked you this before, but I mean, what do you think? I mean, what was did you believe that night? Have you always believed? Did that make a believer out of you?
So I had never believed in ghost stories, and I went because it was fun and it was time with friends. It was not because I thought that we were actually going to have any sort of encounter. But the two things that make me really hold on to that night and think more critically about whether there is such a thing as a ghost or an apparition is the fact that all three of us had such profound and distinct memories of that night, and they were all very, like, it affected us in different ways. And also, and maybe more impactfully, is that while you guys went back in and I stayed outside, it was still a calm night when I was standing in the courtyard. But my cell phone rang, and it was my girlfriend at the time, Sarah, who called, who had been asleep, woke up, had a terrible feeling about the three of us and what was going on, and called to check in on me to make sure that we were okay.
But doesn't she do that like every night?
Oh my goodness,
Jason.
No, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, she checks in a lot, but like, she specifically said that she had a terrible feeling about me, and the fact that she called meant that it was bigger than just the 3 or 4 of us that night, and that something had sort of connected us with other people that weren't even at the site. So
I've never heard that. I've never heard you tell me that before. Wow.
Yeah, it was that sort of made it even more terrifying. You know what was scary in the moment was that when the door initially slammed, I remember thinking that, like, oh, I'm scared because I think someone might be here with us, and someone might be like, there's a drug dealer or a cop or a vagrant who's like gonna cause trouble. And then, I mean, that was scary. And then I ran out, and then when I realized that wasn't the case, that's when it was almost even more scary after it was even all over, because it wasn't a known entity, it was something completely unknown, which makes it even more terrifying.
Correct.
So I've remained skeptical of all of the ghost hunters and ghost stories and this and that, but I will leave the door open for a little bit of belief given what happened to us that night.
So that is our feature segment for the week, guys. I really hope you enjoyed that story. That's one of our favorite stories that we love to tell, and one of the reasons we love to tell it is just to see some people's reaction. And I think our wives have heard that story more than they would care to, but it's an amazing story that I think just all of us will always remember and just always carry with us. And to piggyback off that subject of the just the mental hospital and everything that went on there, I thought it'd be a fun segment to do here, guys, to talk about our top 3 favorite scary movies of all time. So I'll go ahead here and I'll say my number 3 top scary movie of all time was The Ring. That movie just will always scare the crap out of me. I thought it was just a well done movie. My second one, I would have to say, and I may get crap for this one, is Halloween 3. I remember that movie and waiting for Michael to pop out, and when Michael didn't pop out after the first 30 minutes, I realized this was totally different than the originals.
Which one was 3?
The Silver Shamrock, where they go to the factory and the guy makes those masks that has kids put them on and kill the kids. And
is that the one where the kid had the pumpkin head and fell?
Correct. Correct. Okay. Exactly. And so going off of that, it's probably not hard to think of what my number 1 favorite scary movie of all time is, and that's the original 1978 Halloween, and not that crap that Rob Zombie made. I just love that film. I thought Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis did a great job in that film, and that went on to spawn 7 other Halloween films. And the Halloween series in general has a special place in my heart when it comes to horror films. Mike, what about you?
And I just want to say Halloween isn't in my top 3, but I would say one of the scariest scenes ever is when, after Laurie Strode thinks she killed Michael Myers, and she's standing there panting, and he just sits up and looks at her. off, like kind of off in the distance in the camera in the bedroom. That was so creepy.
Yeah.
But I'll go ahead and do my top three. It's hard because I love so many horror movies, but if I have to pick three, I have to blend what was absolutely terrifying and what also I would just watch over and over again, and has also have this nostalgic kind of cool, I love this movie feeling. So number three would be Nightmare on Elm Street 1. And could you get any creepier than that soundtrack? And how people would argue that, but that soundtrack and with the kids playing jump rope and the fact that he can get you in your dreams, and the scene where she falls asleep in the classroom and her friend's in a body bag scratching the body, it was just creepy as heck. Number two, it's a more recent movie, was The Conjuring, and it had a lot of elements of the old school, but it also blended the new school. A lot of really scary parts in that movie, and it was also really interesting and cool. It had the ghost hunter element of it. It had the New England element, which I'm a homer and I love it. It was in Rhode Island, and I just loved that movie, and had a great soundtrack as well. And then there's number one, and number one, again, New England, but it's not because it's a New England movie, because you wouldn't know unless you really paid attention, but it's Pet Sematary, Stephen King's book and movie. And that's number one just because of how much it scared me. Maybe because my brother made me watch it when I was 7 years old.
You're awesome, brother. Good job, brother.
Yeah, but there's a character in there called Zelda, and she has spinal meningitis, and she's bedridden, and she just is so creepy and twisted in bed. And the fact that she's up in the attic and they're living in a normal life in their house, and it's just creepy. That movie is just totally off-putting, but it's also got a lot of nostalgism and a lot of cool parts of it. And it's got some mystery too. So that's my top three.
And Jason, what about you? What are your top three horror films?
All right, so my first one, or number three, is a pretty recent movie that I loved, and I didn't expect to love it. It's called Cabin in the Woods. It blends traditional, in the woods horror with super fun, tech savvy sci-fi. It was equally as fun to watch as it was suspenseful and scary.
What's your number two?
I know this is super cliche and you're all expecting me to say it, so I'm just going to go ahead and knock it out. It's Stranger Things. And I know that Stranger Things was not intended to be an incredibly scary movie, but I find it to be really, really scary because I think it takes the genre of 80s movies, which are really familiar and comfortable, and it introduces a character, a monster that is legitimately scary, and it's done with such high quality CGI that it feels especially real. And the story is just I know that you guys are probably laughing at me, but I feel like the story and the monster and how it all comes together is exceptional, and at the same time supremely scary, especially when it comes through the walls of a house. I mean, if you imagine a monster coming through the walls of your house, which is your safe place, and at times when you don't expect it, it's crazy scary.
And see, I need to see that. You guys give me crap. I think I'm the only person that hasn't seen Stranger Things yet.
Oh, it's fantastic.
And my number one scariest movie of all time, again, probably something that a lot of people would give me crap for, is the movie Signs by M. Night Shyamalan. Specifically the scenes when they're at the birthday party and they have the home video footage of the alien walking through the driveway. I will watch that 100 more times and never be not terrified, even though it's completely a movie. And then just towards the finale, when they're in the basement and they're trapped in their own home and they could hear the aliens in their home upstairs. I mean, there's just nothing scarier in my mind. Even though it's not blood and guts and gore and shoot 'em up, it's just really, really off-putting and really well done.
And as the viewer or listener, actually, sorry, I say viewer just because I'm used to TV news, but as the listener will come to understand, Jason, you're a big M. Night Shyamalan, whatever his name is, fan, correct?
Ding dong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of the first couple of movies, right? I mean, I think everything he did up until and including The Village was amazing, and then starting with Lady in the Water, I found it to be boring.
So, you loved Unbreakable, right?
Absolutely.
Go see Split.
Okay.
I that's all I can say. It's slight spoiler alert by saying that, but go see it.
Yeah, Unbreakable was a great movie. And so with that, gentlemen, we'll go ahead and wrap up the top three from this week, and we'll actually start to close this debut episode of Dude, We're Adults out with a life pro tip of the week. Now, this could be anything that we deem useful for everyday life, like financial tips or how-tos, and a lot of things people don't know, and how these tiny things can make their life a little better. So for this week's tip, I thought it would make it a little lighthearted. And since we actually were talking about this topic yesterday, all three of us, we were talking about pizza. Did you know that when ordering a pizza, one 18-inch pizza is actually more pizza than two 12-inch pizzas? And so I thought that would save people some money while they're actually getting more dough ordering the one larger pizza.
That's pretty good.
Than two 12-inch pizzas.
So you're in a pizza commercial.
So that'll do it this week for Dude, We're Adults, our debut episode here in the podcast world. Guys, any go-home thoughts?
Yeah, when recording a podcast, be sure to finish it before your 2-year-old wakes up.
Two-year-old sick child at the same time, correct?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Wipe back to front.
And with that, thank you so much, guys. I had a blast doing this. And listener out there, we thank you so much for hitting that download button. If you want to get a hold of us, you can send us emails. We would love actually to hear from you. It's dudewe'readults, no apostrophe in that we're, at gmail.com. And you can also find us at Twitter at dudewe'readults. Again, no apostrophe in that word. With that being said, gentlemen, I thank you for being on this podcast, and I look forward to doing this with you guys as much as we can.
Sounds
Thank
good,
you.
guys. Talk to you soon.
Have a good week, everyone.